Today we'll learn how to approach the clinical examination of a patient with carcinoma cervix. Remember, the examination is not just inspection, it begins with history taking and goes step by step in a logical order. Now coming to the presenting complaints. The earliest and most specific symptom is postcoital bleeding. A woman may say she notices spotting or frank bleeding after intercourse, and this should immediately raise suspicion for cervical pathology. Other bleeding patterns include intermenstrual bleeding, bleeding between regular cycles, or postmenopausal bleeding, which is always considered pathological until proven otherwise. Apart from bleeding, discharge is another very common complaint. Patients often describe it as profuse, foul-smelling, watery, or blood-stained. In fact, many will say they need to use cloths or pads throughout the day due to continuous watery discharge. Pain usually develops in later stages. This may present as pelvic pain, dull backache, or dyspareunia, painful intercourse. When the disease advances further, urinary and rectal symptoms can appear. On the urinary side, the patient may complain of frequency, urgency, hematuria, or even retention if the tumor obstructs. Rectal involvement can cause constipation, tenesmus, or bleeding per rectum. Finally, don't forget constitutional symptoms. Patients may report weight loss, generalized fatigue, or swelling of lower limbs due to lymphatic obstruction or venous compression. So, to summarize, in early stages, bleeding and discharge predominate, in later stages, pain and pressure symptoms dominate, and in advanced disease, systemic features appear. After presenting complaints, we now move to the detailed history. First, we always ask the chronology of complaints. When did symptoms begin, how long have they lasted, and how they have progressed. For example, bleeding that was occasional but is now continuous indicates progression. Next is the menstrual history. Note age at menarche, the last menstrual period, and the cycle pattern. Remember, postmenopausal bleeding is a red flag feature. Then the obstetric history, number of pregnancies, live births, and modes of delivery. High parity is a known risk factor for cervical cancer. In the contraceptive history, ask about intrauterine devices, oral contraceptives, or sterilization. Long-term OCP use has been associated with increased risk, whereas barrier methods may be protective. The sexual history is very important but must be asked sensitively. Inquire about age at first intercourse, early onset increases risk, multiple partners, and whether barrier contraception is used. Now the risk factors. The strongest is HPV infection, especially types 16 and 18. Other important factors are early marriage and childbearing, high parity, smoking, HIV, and any immunosuppressive state. Lack of cervical screening or HPV vaccination also plays a major role. We should also ask about past history, any cervical procedures such as LEEP or cone biopsy, or chronic medical illnesses. In the family history, look for gynecologic cancers or hereditary cancer syndromes. Finally, personal and social history, ask about smoking, alcohol, nutrition, and overall socioeconomic status because these influence both risk and prognosis. So, in summary, detailed history helps us not only understand the timeline but also identify risk factors, which are critical in cervical cancer. We quickly assess cardiovascular and respiratory systems to look for fitness for surgery or anesthesia, and for any evidence of metastasis. This part is routine, so I won't go into detail. We quickly assess cardiovascular and respiratory systems to look for fitness for surgery or anesthesia, and for any evidence of metastasis. This part is routine, so I won't go into detail. On abdominal exam, we palpate for any mass, liver metastasis, ascites, or enlarged paraaortic nodes. This is more relevant in advanced stages. Before inserting the speculum, we must first inspect the external genitalia. This is often underestimated but can give us important clues. Look for vulval lesions, ulcerations, or secondary growths. Observe any blood-stained or foul-smelling discharge at the introitus. Assess if the vagina appears narrowed, ulcerated, or distorted. This inspection also helps us ensure that the speculum can be inserted comfortably. Always remember, obtain informed consent, explain to the patient, and use a good light source. After speculum, we proceed to bimanual and vaginal examination. This is the most informative step for staging. Feel cervix, assess the size, consistency, and mobility of the cervix. A hard, irregular, fixed cervix strongly suggests malignancy. To see extent of growth, palpate carefully to see if the growth is confined to the cervix or extends beyond. For vaginal involvement, feel the anterior, posterior, and lateral fornices. If disease involves the upper two-thirds of vagina, palpate the parametrium. This is the most critical part. Place one finger in the lateral fornix and the other hand on the abdomen. Feel for induration or a cord-like band extending into the parametrium. Rectovaginal exam. Insert one finger in rectum and one in vagina to confirm parametrial involvement and assess uterosacral ligaments and rectal mucosa. So, this step actually allows us to clinically stage the majority of cases. Without a good bimanual and rectal exam, staging is incomplete. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please like and